One quick correction. We have modified this Friday, and so instead of doing the traditional Shabbat night, we thought we'd try something different this week. This Friday, there's a opening of a movie coming out called The Lord's Supper. It's by who put it on? Who's the guy? Chris Tomlin. Was part behind that and getting that movie out. So that comes out this Friday. So those of y'all who would like to go and to attend, we're going to do that instead this Friday, something different. All right, if you get your Bibles, go with me to 1 Peter chapter 3. And while I'm talking to y'all, how many of y'all needed the text I sent this morning to know to be here at church at this time? All right, some of us, yeah. So Carson and I were on the way to the gym this morning, and we'll get a quick half-hour workout, 35-minute workout, ain't no big deal. And then we got there, and it's almost that time. It was like it's not 6 o'clock; it was 7 o'clock, and like, wait a minute, why is it so late? And so we're seeing the time on the clock and in the car, and then. And he taught me. I was trying to remember. Is it fall? Is it forward, backwards? And I'm trying to figure is it fall, spring? I couldn't even remember. I was so out of it. And so that's like I better text the church. So an hour later, I got a chance to text y'all. So 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1. And so last week we're talking about the men. This week we're talking about what? The women are like, it's the men still. It's still the men's turn. And it's part 2 for the men. And so it's going to be talking about women today. And again, as we talk about marriage, and again, I know some of us are married, some of us are not yet married, and some of us may get married again, or it might be that somebody have a chance to invest into another family who is married and be able to pass on some wisdom. So I understand that all of us are different stages of our lives where we're at. And so again, the idea, as I said last week, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I'm an equal opportunity offender. It's easier for me to offend men than it is to offend women. You are quiet on that one, guys. I ain't touched that one. It's easier to offend men than it is women. Okay? My goal is not to offend anybody. My goal is to tell you what the Scripture says, what God designed marriage to be. Okay? And if you don't like it, please take it up with the Lord and not with me. And that would be quite helpful. All right. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1. It says, likewise, wives be submitted to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the message, by the wife's conduct, without a word, then be won over, as they observe your pure, reverent conduct. Don't let your beauty be external, braiding the hair and the wearing gold jewelry and of fine clothes. Instead, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is the way that the holy women who put their hope in God used to beautify themselves long ago, being submitted to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. You have become heirs, you have become her daughters by doing what is good, not fearing intimidation. And he goes on to say, in the same way, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. And that's what we began talking about last week. So the idea is that the foundation here about marriage. And so in context here, we've been looking at these sections here, and we've looked at the Beatitudes here. That we talked about salt and light. We talked about anger, and with that, some of the opposition, coveting another man's wife. Last week, we started this idea of divorce here in this context here, and how to strengthen your marriage and stay out of divorce. And here, the idea of loving your enemies. And so the areas in white are the areas we still need to talk about in this section of Matthew chapter 5. Some background. From 1950 to 2025, so roughly 75 years, inflation has increased 1,200 to 1,300%. It increased 1,200 to 1,300%. With that, meaning $100 in 1950 is equivalent to approximately $1,300 to $1,400 today. Because of the inflation, the goal of the inflation is to try to keep it at 2%. This is at an average of 3.5%. So the goal would therefore be this should be around $700, give or take, $750, give or take is kind of the goal. But so it's almost double of what their goal is for inflation. And there was a lot of inflation in a couple periods in time But with this, we're averaging 3.5%. And with that, the reason I'm bringing this out is because the cost of living has increased, so too does the need for two people to be working in a family. Okay? Because the cost of living has increased, the need for men and women both to work in a family has increased. That was not necessarily the best case scenario or God's design per se, but it's a case in which we live in our society. Sometimes a husband can get a good job and be able to allow a woman to be able to stay home. And most men, that is their first goal, that's their first objective. And sometimes that doesn't happen, or sometimes life circumstances, or be where they may, kids are out of the house, and there's all kind of different variables that go into some of this here. But I'm just talking, listen, I can go into caveats and rabbit trails all day long. I'm saying general in my conversation today, okay? Saying general in my conversation. So, but as a rule, a majority of families today have to have two people working in some capacity in order to be able to make everything work. And that is because of inflation. Inflation is caused by government spending. Inflation is caused by government spending. So when our government prints money and they print money and they spend more than we are bringing in, that brings about inflation. So because of poor management in Washington, this is what we have today. Okay, so let's just be I'm being very, very general here, but government spending brings about inflation because the government does not spend wisely. It takes two people in a home now in most homes, in order to make everything work financially. Okay, that's just basic math here. Okay. Second point I want to get as a background text is most marriages were arranged in biblical days and even other parts of the world today. And girls typically married at 13 to 15 years of age. Boys are typically 16 to 18. And so it's a different culture. In this culture here, whenever you got married, you went and basically added an addition to your father's house, and you were there. So you had a support structure from the get-go. So today, when young people get married, what's the first thing they do? They get married and they do what? Go in debt. Why? Because they can't afford, or they can't afford it, or they want to do what? They want to match their lifestyle they're accustomed to when they lived with their parents. So they want to keep that lifestyle, that custom, so they do what? They start going in debt. Not getting cars they can really afford, but getting cars that they want, or the way the food and eating and all that goes into it. So, but because of this, the support structure is not there. And so what happens is the need to be able to make money is even stronger because their support structure. In other words, if you lived in your father's house, your bills would be small. But now because you're on your own, guess what? Your bills are large. And then with inflation and all this compounds that goes into this here, okay? The average age women are getting married today is 28.6 years of age. Part of the so it's double, actually more than double on average here. It's about double here of the average age women are getting married from biblical days to today, okay? One of the main reasons that married young is because it allowed for many more childbearing years. Remember the biblical command instruction to be fruitful and multiply. And one of the ways to multiply was to be able to have children younger. And so that was kind of some of the basis here. But the side effect is when you get married younger, you don't have to deal with what? Temptation. So if you got married younger, you didn't have to battle the same temptation, and you have a lot of kids. That's the basic premise. And you say, well, I like that or I don't like this. It's irrelevant. History is history. History said this is the foundation of how people got married younger, and they could afford to because they were an add-on to the father's house. But again, because of all inflation. So a lot of the instructions here about the biblical framework for how homes should be is difficult to make exact A for A equivalent matchups because a lot of our homes are two-party working homes. Now, I know there are some that are not, but the majority are, and therefore it causes a little bit of, okay, well, this is how it was, how the instructions were given. How do I apply this to my life and my society and today? So that's kind of the idea of trying to find apples for apples equivalent. So Genesis 3 says, to the woman he says, now we're going back to the beginning, when Adam was created and Eve was created to kind of get the foundation of how all this starts. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pain and from conception to labor. In pain you will give birth to children, and your desire will be to your husband. yet he must rule over you. And Hebrew is a lot clearer than you get in English. The idea is not so much that your desire will be to your husband, the idea of your desire will be to control your husband. That's kind of the foundation. I know none of y'all know any wives who want to try to manage their husbands, tell them how they should do, what they should do, when they should do it. But if you've ever heard of other women who do that, this is the idea of where that comes from. This is the foundation where it comes from. The desire would be to control your husband, okay? And so today, we still battle today. Now, let's take a step back for a second, okay? What did the wife do in the garden? She went independent and went and ate of the fruit instead of following her husband's lead. Her husband did what? Wanted to please his wife. The Bible does not say the man was deceived. It says the woman was deceived. The man was not deceived. He knew what he was doing. But he wanted to do what? Please his wife, so he went along with it. Because he wasn't being an effective leader for his wife. He should have said, no, our Lord says no, we're not going to do that. And he did what? He went along with it here. A lot of times we have, what happened? All the sin we have today all stems from that. And so the same thing happens in our homes today. A lot of times, guys, we will let our women take the lead in our homes, and we'll do what? We want to just make peace. And mama's not happy, nobody's happy, so let's just make peace. We go along with it and do what? We get out of the biblical framework that God designed for us. Verse 17, then to the man he said, because you listened to your wife's voice and ate of the tree which I commanded you, so you listened to your wife over me. You listened to your wife over me. Guys, we report to the Lord first, to our wife second. You hear me? Guys, we report to the Lord first, our wife second. When we get this out of order, we have problems. We have disorder in our homes. He said, wife's voice and ate of the tree which I commanded you, saying, you must not eat of it. Curses the ground because of you, with pain you will eat of it all the days of your life. So in other words, again, the idea is they got the order wrong. There's disorder in the home because of disorder. Again, last week I showed you some of this idea here is reason for divorce, and 75% of people get divorced because of lack of commitment. So you have one side getting more committed than the other side. So for the husband saying, I'm committed, but my wife's not, or the wife will say, I'm committed, but my husband's not. And so this whole idea of this divorce here and the commitment back and forth here and all this kind of garbage goes into this. And then sometimes you'll have homes that both sides, the man and the woman, are not do what? They're not committed. You have that too. So you have all this here, but so 3 out of 4 people say divorce. That's the number one reason, because of lack of commitment on one or both spouses. Number 2 is infidelity. Almost 2/3. And number 3 is because of conflict and arguing. Number 4, getting married too young. And number 5 is financial problems. Those are top 5. But if you look right here, infidelity and too much conflict and getting married too young and financial problems, lack of commitment, in part, all of these can stem from a lack of communication. In part, all of these can stem from a lack of communication. Ineffective communication can lead to all these things right here. I can't communicate with my spouse. I can't even get along with my spouse to do what? I'll just talk to somebody else. Sometimes it's not even... So I see my audience is here. I'm always trying to be careful, kids. Sometimes it's not even a sexual thing. Sometimes the idea of this person over here, there's no conflict with this person here, so I'm going to go be intimate with somebody who's not my spouse. It's not even sexual sometimes. It is just an escape from the idea of conflict. There's no conflict with that person there, so guess what? That's where my attention, my affection is going to go. And sometimes and I can build on that in a lot of different ways here. But please understand something. A lot of the conflict comes from ineffective communication. Biblically, for wives, our wives are to honor our husband's leadership and celebrate his victories. Wives are supposed to honor his leadership and celebrate his victories. This graduation, the idea of submitting to our husbands and respecting our husbands, and even Sarah calling her husband Lord, all of this stems from the idea from the very beginning is God initially instituted the man, and then he created the woman. He created the man, and then he created the woman. And he says the reason for this order is because the order of creation, which we read in Genesis, we read this in 1 Corinthians. And so the idea, and the second thing is because of the role of the man and the woman in the fall. He says, I created the man and then the woman. But secondly, to add to this, she was deceived and he wasn't. And that laid the foundation for the roles we have in our homes today, is a man should lead and the woman should follow his lead. Now, I understand sometimes a man can be a good leader in a home. I understand sometimes a man can be a poor leader in a home. And I also understand sometimes a woman can do a better job than a man can in the home. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes I can. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. When we get out of order, we are in disorder. When we get out of order, we're in disorder. That's not God's design. For some ladies, it is easier to follow our husband's lead than it is for others. And sometimes we get an idea, well, if my husband was like this, then I could follow his lead better. Or if my husband was like that girl's husband, then I could follow him later. Take that up with the Lord. That is wrong thinking. It may be correct, but it is wrong. Because it is taking our humanistic, our ideologies of what we perceive, and we get into our own alignment and say, God, I know what you said, but. Create our own new path. God said, that's not the design I have for you. You're to honor his lead. You're to honor his lead. You're to respect him. You're to submit to his leadership. And I understand sometimes, especially, I know, in our Western modern culture, what I'm teaching today is unpopular. But take it up with the Lord. God designed marriage, and we should not come to the scriptures with a Western modern concept what marriage is supposed to be like, because sometimes we are all, myself included, we're all more infiltrated by what the world thinks marriage should be versus what God said it should be. Why? Because we're surrounded by the world our whole lives. Few things will strengthen a man as knowing his wife is proud of him. Few things will strengthen a man more than knowing that a wife is proud of him. Listen, your husband may or may not be a good leader, but would do what? Focus on the areas of strength where he is. Focus on his strengths, not his weaknesses. Be a woman who is proud of her husband and be his biggest cheerleaders. He may not be a good leader, but you see, you know what? Well, my husband proves he's a good leader, then I'll follow him. But until such time, I won't. Okay? But the scripture says you do it as to the Lord. As to the Lord, not in a man. He may not be a good leader, but you're not doing it just for him. You're doing it for the Lord. As to the Lord, as to the Lord, as to the Lord. It is for the Lord you're doing this, not for him. It may be easy because he may be a good leader. He may be a bad leader, but you're not doing it for him. You're doing it for the Lord. And as you're doing it for the Lord, guess what? You're beginning to nurture and minister to him in ways you cannot quantify yet. Because we're saying, well, when I see the evidence, then I will. That's not faith. That's not faith. Are we going to trust God or not trust God? God says, I'm giving you instructions. Well, when I see the evidence of it, and then I'll do what God said. That's not faith. Faith is following his instructions whether we see the evidence yet or not. Because God put forth a path that we're to walk in faith and not by sight. Enrich him. An idea of enriching the home. Enriching the children, bringing more children into the world. And again, the idea of, from a biblical mindset of be fruitful and multiply. So not only you're bringing children into the home, you are enriching the home and bringing value into the home. You're doing what? You're bringing about productive children. preserving the finances. You're not wasting the finances. Raising respectable children, supporting the home, creating a haven of rest. Stretching the dollars allows a husband to be at peace while providing. Because he knows what, the man, and I understand two people working homes, I get all this. I'm just speaking general here today. The idea is if a man is providing, he's doing everything he can to provide for his home. And as he's doing this, he knows that the money and the effort he's putting in is not being squandered. Brings him peace. Brings him peace. While providing, allow him to what? Look forward to returning home because he's not coming home to what? Chaos. And sometimes if a wife and a mother is not being effective in her leadership with her children, then guess what? Then she is stressed out, she's maxed out, and so guess what? When the husband comes home, it's your turn, and this kind of mindset here of just being absolutely worn out with your kids, it shows that we're actually being an ineffective leader with our kids, which is causing us to be stressed out. If our kids are stressing us out that bad, then we're not mothering correctly. We're not parenting correctly. So the idea is that when the husband comes home, it's not I'm passing the baton, I'm just worn out, stressed out now. The idea is he's supposed to come home to a haven of rest. A haven of rest. So he can't wait to come home. There's many a man that says, you know what? I have more peace at work than I do at home, so guess what? I'm not in a hurry to get home. I'm not in a hurry to get home. That's common. I'm not saying Christian home, non-Christian home. I'm saying general homes. A lot of people, and sometimes it's wives too. Sometimes wives too. A wife is working, you say, you know what? And so I'm working. I don't want to go home in chaos. I'll stay at work. Sometimes wives too. But the idea being that a woman is to do what? Enrich the home. Enrich the home. Lighten his load with loving care. Supporting him with meals, clean clothes, simple notes of little hidden notes sometimes, and to your husband, tell him you're proud of him, that you love him, or little words of encouragement to him, and do what? You're investing into him. It's so easy to tear down our spouses instead of finding ways to invest to build them up. It's easy to tell them why they're not good at what they're doing. They're not a good husband, or they're not a good father, or they're not a good provider, and they're all good and just nagging and coming after them. It's easy to remind them and say, doing what? Being smarter and wiser, invest into them, so do what? They can become better at the things they're called to do. That takes wisdom. A lot of times, women will do what? We'll act, not so we, but you. I'm so used to being inclusive in all my speech around here, but the idea is that women will do what? They will speak emotionally, and because what they're feeling, they're expressing the feelings. The problem is sometimes it's detrimental because there's no wisdom in it. I'm not saying don't have time to express your feelings to your husband. I'm not saying all that kind of garbage, but do something to do with wisdom. Sometimes there's expression of feelings and without filter. Where's the wisdom in that? Where's the wisdom in having no filter when you're talking to your spouse? That's the person you got to live with the rest of your life. Why would you do what? Just tear them down with unfiltered words. There's no wisdom. There's no prudence in that. Pleasant. Tend to your inner beauty and your outer beauty. The idea sometimes that listen, I understand that over time that the outward beauty has a tendency to fade. But so too, as your outward beauty tends to fade, so does your inner beauty. See? There's always beauty there. Men are naturally attracted to beauty. It can be inner beauty, it can be outer beauty, and sometimes the beginning there, it may be mostly outer beauty. That's fine. But so too, as general rule, outer beauty tends to fade. So do what? Your inner beauty comes and builds and builds and builds and builds. And what? So what? There's always beauty for him to admire. Our women, are we providing beauty for our husbands to admire? The inner beauty. He says, speaks about the idea of, and we read earlier, that about being the hidden, the quiet, spirited nature person of the heart. Is that where we're at? And sometimes it's the idea that we're not focusing on growing ourselves, we're so focused on fixing our spouse. You spend more time on appearance for others than your own spouse. Sometimes it's tendency for sometimes, not here, but other ladies in houses, the women can look not their best at home and kind of rag it out at home and not look their best. And sometimes when a man goes to work, the woman's not being her best and she's looking unkept. And I'm trying to be so kind, being unkept. And then possibly being unkept. And then he goes to work sometimes and he finds women who are what? Who are looking nice. Who do what? Took care of themselves. And sometimes then the man comes home and then guess what? She's still unkept. Or she's what? At this point she's all ragged out by the rest of the day and the kids and say, it's your turn. And he's like, and so I'm saying that sometimes you got to understand, have a little bit of wisdom and step back. It's not just about me. Let's step back, look at the big picture of what's going on here, of his roles, of my roles, how each are contributing to some of the challenges we have in our homes sometimes. And sometimes it's because we'll spend more time looking good for others instead of looking good for our spouse. And we need to understand that sometimes. Well, I'll let my guard down. I'm married. I let my guard down. But then I'm going around to other people. Then I'll look good. Yeah, a guy likes to have somebody look at his wife and be proud of his wife who's next to him. And I get all that. But sometimes it's not just about going in front of other people. It's also about our own house. Are you taking care of your inner beauty? Not just taking care of your outer beauty. Are you growing in that inner beauty? A lot of times wives will hit stalemate. And they will stall out with that inner beauty because they're so focused on waiting for their husband to take the next step before they do. He's supposed to be the leader. He should go. And so when he does, I will. The problem is sometimes the man does it to the wife does it to the husband. And guess what? And you just stall out. And then you go back to the number one reason why people get divorced. Lack of trying. No one calls a divorce. Well, I'm waiting on my spouse to do better than I will. I'm waiting on my husband to do better than I will. It's a lack of commitment. That's the number one reason why people get divorced. That mentality that we have, and I'm entitled, that entitlement spirit is number one cause of divorce. Engage with him in his interests. This is a big one. That a lot of times, so a guy will have certain interests and a woman will have certain interests. And so what? The woman will say, you know what? I don't have any interest in my husband's hobbies and his interests, what he cares about. And so what? A lot of times our women don't. And the biggest thing that men need sometimes is shoulder-to-shoulder time. As we said last week, a lot of times women need eye-to-eye time. So women need that face-to-face, eye-to-eye time, the communication and know that she's being heard and talking that eye-to-eye time. And a lot of times, there's exceptions, but as a general rule, men don't need that as a general rule. We need shoulder-to-shoulder time. In other words, if I'm going to do something, I want my wife to go with me. Why? Just do it with me. Shoulder-to-shoulder time. It doesn't have to be, we're going to have these deep, intense, connecting conversations. Just, hey, let's go do something. I'm going to go do something. You going to go with me? Actually, no. Okay, yes. That's the difference. Men don't always need that, but sometimes, as a general rule, women do. And with this here, women, so you know what? I don't have any interest in his desires. What happens? Sometimes men find another woman who will take interest in him or his desire, or you have the natural same desires instinctively to do what? So you have a lostness of connection. Women engage with his interests and activities. It's not just about you. It's about engaging with him. Do we want to engage with him? You don't have to always have interest. So you know what? I have no interest in what he likes to do, but do I do what? I suck it up and do it anyways. Why? Because I want to be with him. It's not about his activity. Being reverent. Winning him with pure and reverent behavior. Now here's a big one here, okay? What if you do not trust he's making the best decision? This thing, well, I want to submit to my husband. I want to submit to his leadership. And sometimes we say that we're lying. But if say when we do want to, but my husband doesn't have a pattern making good decisions. Or he's not making a good decision right now. And I got the correct decision. Let me tell you all about it. And sometimes a woman says, you know what? I want to fix my husband. I want to tell him how he's wrong again. And sometimes there's that pattern or that mentality here. And so the answer that Paul gives is not to nag your husbands about how he is wrong or how he needs to fix himself. First Peter says, likewise, wives, be submitted to your own husbands so that even if some are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. by the wife's conduct, without a word, may be won over. He did not say by the wife's conduct and with many words. That was quiet. He did not say with many words. He says without a word. That's the instinctively natural opposite for many women. Because the natural instinct for many women is to what? Not to keep their mouth shut, but tell you why. Why? Because women are more expressive. Guys, we don't want women to be like guys. We want them to be different. We want them to be soft and affectionate and tenderly. I don't want to be married to a man. I want to have a tenderly affectionate wife. Okay? And sometimes, at the same time, it goes back and forth with women. But with that the tendency sometimes is for wives to do what? Use their words to convince their husband, or their emotion, or the pitch of their words, or their amount of the words, or the strength of the words they use. All that goes into that. But Paul says, without a word, means your pitch has no relevance, the strength of your words has no relevance, the amount of your words has no relevance. It's irrelevant. By the wife's conduct, without a word, they may be won over. As they observe your pure, reverent conduct with unfading beauty. Why? That inner beauty. That inner beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. Not a nagging spirit. Not a complaining spirit. Not a critical spirit. A gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So are we doing it for your husband? Sometimes we're doing it for God. Sometimes we're doing it for God. It's not just about me and what I want to be heard. We're doing it for the Lord. As to the Lord. As to the Lord. In God's sight. In God's sight. You see the issue here? The issue sometimes we make it about me and my husband and what I want and what I think and what I feel. What about the Lord? Getting into proper alignment with the Lord's design for us is. And God's sight is very precious. Remember, are we doing it for the Lord? Are we living by faith? Or are we doing it for our own sight, what we can understand, what we can perceive? And God's sight is very precious. For this is the way the holy women who put their what? Their hope in fixing their husband. Yeah, that ship sailed. That ship sailed. I ain't going to fix my husband. I already know who I'm married to now. No. Who what? Put their hope in God. Who put their hope in God. For this way, the holy women who put their hope in God. Why? Who what? In God's sight. They're not trying to win their husband who's wrong or who may be wrong. You're winning him over with a gentle and quiet spirit, not the nagging, loud, obnoxious spirit. Which in God's sight, who put their hope in God, used to beautify themselves long ago, being submitted to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. Listen, this is the design that God, some of us may like it, some of us may not. It is definitely not Western modern advice. This is God's design. God made man and woman. He instituted marriage. I think his ways are better than ours. When we come to a place where we say, you know what? I don't understand this. I may not even like it. God, would you change my heart so that I may see my marriage as you see it and design it to be? And it may be in that process, you know what? It may not be an instant fix. It may take time to fix. But if we're putting our hope in God and following the Lord's lead, then over time, we're looking to make that investment into our spouse to get the change we need to get there by doing what? By putting their hope in God, not in our own effort to fix our husband. It says here in Genesis 2, it's not good for the man to be alone. Let me make a well-matched helper for him. From the very beginning, the design from the very, 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 very beginning of all time, of all creation, was to allow God to have a wife who was well matched for him, who did what? Who helped him. But if you look at the nature here, the idea of helping our husband is not about me. The reason one of the reasons, the main reason there's so much conflict for wives and homes because wives will make it about me and how I feel and what it means to me and how you're not doing for me. And that self-centeredness of sometimes our wives, and especially modern Western, not everywhere, but modern Western especially, could make it about me and not about helping my husband, is the foundation for conflict. It's the foundation for conflict. And I understand all the arguments out there. Well, I don't want to be a doormat. That's stupid. I understand. I understand sometimes men out there will treat their wives as a doormat. And I get that. That's not what we're talking about here. Maybe not lump everything into one big basket and say, and go these extreme examples here. The idea here, the foundation here, is to how to live in godly alignment, in godly order. He designed a female, he designed a wife to be a helper to the man. That is not Western modern. That's biblical. That's the biblical design that God gave. And when we get into proper alignment, when our wife is properly helping the husband naturally responds. Because you know what? You're ministering to him. And you're not fixing him. You're ministering to him. You're nurturing him. In the process of ministering to your husband, by honoring him, enriching him, lightening his load, being pleasant to be around, engaging, being reverent. All this is helping your husband. And as you're helping your husband, it allows it to be symbiotic, as we talked about last week, it allows him to please you. The married man cares about how he may please his wife. And so the man pleases his wife, and the wife helps her husband. Helping and pleasing, helping and pleasing, helping and pleasing. And there's a symbiotic relationship as a husband is thinking about how he may please his wife, so too the wife is thinking about how she may help her husband. And that symbiotic relationship is how to have peace in our homes. A lot of times we don't have peace in our home because we're defining, remember, definitions dictate theology and practice. And so with that there, we have the wrong definition of what I'm supposed to be for my husband. Therefore, my doctrine, my theology, my practice is wrong because my definition is wrong. We need to get in alignment with what God designed marriage to be, what he designed a man to be, what he designed a woman to be. And with that brings about peace. If you remember last week, I spoke about this idea that a husband and a wife, when they're properly complementing each other and they're coming together and the man has his strengths and the wife has her strengths and they come together and they're fitting each other's needs perfectly. So that why? When God looks down, he can see his reflection in the home. A lot of times he can't, and there's a whole other topic you get into biblical theology proper, and what I mean by that is the idea of you understand the nature and character of God, you will see certain characteristics that a guy has that is seen that God has in a man. You see other characteristics, these nurturing characteristics that you'll see in a female. Well, it's beautiful when you go back and study this. The idea that since there is no female in heaven, then the characteristics that are godly inside a woman are seen in God, and the characteristics that are godly and seen in a man are seen in God. And so God sees both his characteristics in a man and woman. He split his nature between a man and a woman. So when the man and woman come together and they're walking properly, he sees his nature, he's reflecting his character. Why? Because both of them are bringing his compliments, his nature to the table, because both of them are seeing it within each other. That's God's design. When we get out of order and we have disorder in our home, and guess what? It's fractured. There's no harmony. There's no peace in the home. And guess what? When God looks down, he says, man, that's not me. That's not what I designed. Oh, man, that hurts my heart. That's the exact opposite of what I want for your home, what I want for your peace. I'm telling you how to have peace in your home. You don't want to listen. You don't want to listen. That hardness of heart, because it's about me and what I want. Hear me. I want my voice to be heard. And it's me, 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 me. And all of this is not helping. It's not helping. It's continuing to hurt. Listen, we've already tried it the wrong way. What does it hurt to try it the right way? What do you got to lose? You've already tried it the wrong way. Why not try it the right way? Why not try helping your husband and helping your marriage and helping your kids by exemplifying godliness, so that God may see his character in both the man and the woman, where he split his nature between both to come together to make one. Father, thank you for loving us, for giving us an example, for just sharing your character differently between a man and a woman, and how you designed us to come together